Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever it happens to be when you're watching my video. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Gordon Causey. I'm here to offer my thoughts, my views, my opinions on the political landscape in Canada and uh, talk about the upcoming election, obviously. If you're watching my video, you're 99.9% all certain to be already aware of the fact that Canadians will be voting on April 28th to elect our next parliament, which will determine who will be the prime minister of this country for potentially the next 4 years, depending on whether it's a majority or a minority situation. And right now, I can already hear, see, sense conservative minded Canadians, their heads are exploding one end of the country to the other, wondering how, in the name of Holy Hannah, can Mark Carney, with all his lying, unethical behavior, now we have allegations of plagiarism with respect to his doctoral thesis at Oxford University. How is it that the Liberals, in the most recent polling published by Angus Reid, have them punching up in and around 45%, which is majority territory? Once you get north of 40% in our fractious parliamentary system with Liberal, Conservative, NDP, Green, Bloc Québécois in the province of Quebec, even the PPC, although they won't elect any members. I'll make a bold prediction there. There's a really safe prediction that the PPC will elect 0 members. Yeah. 40%. If you can get up in and around 40% in the polls, you have a very good chance of forming a majority government. Mark Carney could be leading a majority parliament as of April 28th. And conservative minded Canadians, after having suffered through 10 years of liberal mismanagement of our economy and our democracy, are just, how is this possible? How could this happen? The latest allegations of uh, plagiarism detailed in I've got it linked up here, an MSN news article talking about the fact that there are university academics who vet doctoral works for plagiarism have found 10 instances where Mark Carney repeated the opinions, the wording, word for word, or summations of other people's arguments without providing attribution, without footnoting and saying that, giving the source of this, what he was writing. I'll share the article right now. And don't trust anything that I have to say. I say this frequently on my videos. The fact that quite often you'll listen to CBC or CTV or Global, and they like to put on taglines like "your trusted source for news" or "ethical journalism" or stuff like that. And the simple fact of the matter is, don't trust anyone, especially when they tell you that they are trustworthy. That should be a red flag right there. It's like when a salesman says to you, "I'm going to be honest here. I'm going to be honest with you now." Well, that's a red flag that you're dealing with someone who lies. And when a news source has to tell you, "We are your trusted source," that should be a red flag. And you should verify, fact check, because so often CBC has been caught lying and engaged in unethical journalistic practices, as has CTV and Global. I could give myriad of examples, but I don't want my video to go on forever. I have detailed instances of our lying media many times in my previous videos. So let me share that article from MSN. Where is it? Share screen. And we go. Oh, wrong one. Mark Carney faces plagiarism accusation. Share. So the article, MSN. There's Mark. A YouTube video associated with it. I'll share the link to this down in the description to the video. He's been accused of taking other people's ideas as his own. and nothing new. Uh, um, the competition, and there are 10 instances. Sorry about that. uh, According to the judgment of three university academics who reviewed the material, and these are academics who that's their job to vet doctoral papers to see whether or not they are paraphrasing or if they are plagiarizing. In several sections of his thesis, Carney used full quotes, paraphrases, or slightly modified quotes from four previous works without proper acknowledgement or attribution. I'm here to tell you right now, this won't matter. Canadians don't care. They don't care if Mark Carney lies, is unethical, or plagiarizes. And the reason is because the nightly news is not going to tell them to care. I say often on my channel that the media is there to program people what to think, what to believe, and even how to feel about things. And unless they frame things in a manner that triggers emotional response from the viewer, people just they'll cover it and they won't shine a bright spotlight. They'll just move on. And that's how come Trudeau was able to get away with lying about how many times he exhibited racist behavior by painting himself in blackface, and uh, how he was able to fire Canada's Jody Wilson-Raybould for refusing to give in to pressure from the Prime Minister's office. Trudeau directly interfered in a criminal proceeding against SNC-Lavalin, company with big donor to the Liberal Party of Canada, and Trudeau intervened on their behalf and tried to get them a plea bargain so that they would not be convicted of a breach of they had been bribing government officials to in other countries to get contracts, and Jody Wilson-Raybould's office was prosecuting them for their crimes, and they were later convicted because Jody Wilson-Raybould would not give in to the pressure coming from the Prime Minister's office, and because of her ethical stand, Justin Trudeau fired her, but Canadians didn't care because we were not programmed to care by the news. And you know, Trudeau took trips from the accepted gifts from the Aga Khan, who heads a well, he's passed away now, but when he was alive, he was the head of a large charitable organization that received Government of Canada money. And as Prime Minister of Canada, you're not supposed to accept gifts from individuals who head up organizations funded by the government. It's kind of obvious. Trudeau had so many ethical violations, but Canadians didn't care because the news didn't tell them to. And in fairness to Mark Carney, the individual who was in charge of advising, he was the who was the doctoral supervisor at Oxford University, who would have been guiding Mark Carney in the writing of his thesis. She claims that it's a mischaracterization of this work, and she sees no evidence of plagiarism. Well, given that it would have been her job to recognize it when it came out, if she missed it, it makes her look bad. So she's saying nothing to see here, folks. And that'll be good enough, especially for partisan types, for individuals who will vote Liberal every day of the week and twice on Sunday, who vote Liberal every election going back all their lives. Just a small little side point, if anyone's curious as to my political leanings. I am not your typical voter who votes for the same party every single election. There are individuals in this country who have voted from the age of 18 forward. I'm 58, who've spent their entire lives voting for only one party. I always vote Liberal, and they're proud of it. And likewise, individuals, I've never voted Liberal. I always vote Conservative. Myself, I have voted Liberal, NDP, Conservative. I voted PPC. I lived in Quebec for from 2011 to 2015. I was there for two elections, and I even voted for the Parti Québécois. Oui, je parle français. I'm a Canadian military veteran. and I was posted to Valcarce from 2011 to 2015. And I was there for an election. The first election, I voted Liberal. And that election was won by Pauline Marois and the Parti Québécois. And after they'd been in power 2, 3 years, I thought they'd done a reasonably good job managing the economy and taking care of things. So I switched my vote. The following election, I actually voted Péquiste. But that's just, I just put that out there to make the point that I don't have tunnel vision. And I also studied political science at university, and I try to take a detached view from things. It's an unfortunate situation right now I find us in this election. I am very much opposed to the thought of having Mark Carney as our prime minister, but my thoughts on the matter don't mean a heck of a lot, because it is the will of the voting public, and the voting public is very easy to steer and manipulate. Justin Trudeau lied. He engaged in unethical behavior. He was an embarrassment a lot of the times. I'm a people, but the news still is a very powerful influence during political elections, and they can frame the narrative, and they tell, again, Canadians what to think, what to believe, and even how to feel about things. And people are not going to be told to care about the fact that Mark Carney has been caught lying. He said that Brookfield, which opted to move its corporate headquarters from Toronto to New York City, he said during the election campaign that decision was made when after he had left his position as chairman of the board, or if you're concerned with political correctness, the chair. I prefer the term chairman. He was the chairman of the board. He said, yeah, but that decision was made after I left. And that was a lie. You can go online, just search out Mark Carney letter Brookfield shareholders, and you'll see there are all kinds of the letter that Mark Carney sent to shareholders urging them to approve what the board of directors, the decision they had made under his leadership. And he was urging them to approve this move that I, as chairman of the board and the board of directors, we are recommending that you approve this. And that was done before he left his position as chairman of the board. When the decision was actually made and the shareholders approved what Mark Carney advised them to do, then he left. And then it was after that the office was moved. High-paying Canadian jobs were removed from Toronto, sent down to Donald Trump's old playground of New York City. But again, the news isn't going to give it a lot of coverage, just a little bit. They're not going to shine a bright spotlight. They're not going to loop it so that it's coming up in every news cycle. They're just going to touch on it and then let it fade into background noise. What stays front and center is the fact that just after having been installed as Canada's prime minister, after having been anointed by Liberal Party members, Mark Carney got on a wide-body jet and flew over to France. He flew over to England, acting as Canada's prime minister, not doing anything substantial, not doing anything of any consequence. Nothing tangible was achieved aside from just a meet and greet with Macron, with Starmer. And it was a good photo opportunity. And the media didn't hold them to task for it. Why are you going on foreign trips when you're really just a caretaker prime minister who's been installed? You don't even have a seat in the House of Commons. They weren't going to do that. They weren't going to paint Mark Carney in a negative light, because our corporate media class and the government-owned CBC is doing their darndest to ensure that Canadians will elect Mark Carney. And we are, if you're a conservative-minded Canadian, concerned with the fact that you have an ethical, lying, plagiarizing man running for prime minister, it's going to be very hard to defeat him when you're going up against the corporate media machine and the government media machine, because we have to remember we live in Canada, where we have the CBC, government-funded news. It's like the old Soviet Union and their TASS news agency. Yes, the Canadian media, they lie. They misrepresent. We saw it in spades during the COVID era. We saw it during the 2016 election between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton came out with baseless accusations, no foundation and no evidence ever provided. But the news repeated constantly about how there had been Russian interference in that election. The only problem was there was never any evidence provided for that. And then likewise, in 2020, Donald Trump, after having lost the White House to Joe Biden, he made allegations unproven that there had been voter fraud, that the mail in ballots had been, that signatures weren't verified, and that there was fraud that took place in the election. The only thing is, Donald Trump was unable to back up those allegations with actual, solid, irrefutable proof. We can go into the COVID era, of course, when CBC News, along with pretty much every media outlet, mainstream or otherwise, were coming out with the story that SARS-CoV-2 originated in a bat population and that it jumped from a bat to a human in a wet market in Wuhan, China, which has now been pretty much thoroughly debunked simply because there's no evidence to support that supposition that SARS-CoV-2 originated in a bat population. And we know this because researchers have examined bat populations all over China and all far and wide all around the world, looking for the source of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And they come up completely dry. And it's looking more and more like the individuals who were gaslit and scandalized and trashed and called quacks, but they were right. The individuals like Dr. James Redfield, head of the CDC in the United States, a trained virologist, Dr. Luc Montagnier, a Nobel Prize winning virologist from France, and countless others were of the opinion that SARS-CoV-2 originated in the lab. And now we have reports widely accepted that that's, pretty much, that's the most likely source, but you weren't allowed to say that. CBC would call that misinformation back in 2020. They lie. We saw Colin Powell during the the Persian Gulf War. Colin Powell went before the United Nations and he gave a video presentation proving irrefutably that the nation of Iraq, that Saddam Hussein, that they had weapons of mass destruction, which led to that war that killed countless thousands of people, all based on this idea that we had to wipe out Saddam Hussein's and Iraq's weapons of mass destruction, which later turned out to be that those who had been saying that Iraq doesn't have any weapons of mass destruction, they were the ones who were right. So often what is labeled misinformation, disinformation, turns out to be true. Likewise with the Hunter Biden laptop story in the United States. That was labeled as Russian disinformation by media outlets. And then later we found out, well, gee, it wasn't Russian misinformation. Yes, the accusations about that infamous laptop were 100%, they were on the money. And Hunter Biden had to be pardoned by daddy just before he left the White House. But I'm digressing into American politics now. I appreciate you watching the video. I'm going to give a suggestion as to how we could potentially turn the tide and flip the narrative and send liberal fortunes heading back down as they were back when Mark Carney was just advising Justin Trudeau about how to destroy our great nation of Canada. I do have a suggestion to that, but before I do, I appreciate everyone who likes, shares, subscribes to my videos. I am trying to grow my channel. So if you're of a mind and want to hit that like button, if you want to fill the comment section, I appreciate that as well. It helps the algorithms. It helps build my visibility. So all that is appreciated. So how are we going to flip the narrative? How are we going to send liberal fortunes back to where they were when Canadians realized that this policy of impoverishing Canadians to fight the big bag boogeyman of climate change, something Mark Carney is all in on. This idea that we have to achieve net zero in Canada, and Canadians can freeze to death in the dark, as if a nation of 40 million in a planet with 8 billion people, like we're going to save the planet, while a country like China, with 35 times our own population, they're 1.4 billion. They keep bringing on more and more coal-fired hydroelectric generation. And in Canada, we're impoverishing ourselves. We're in a trade war with China right now. China has imposed 100% tariffs on things like agricultural products like canola oil, uh, high tariffs on our seafood products that are going to decimate the fisheries in the East Coast and in British Columbia. But the news isn't telling people to care about that. It's okay to be in a trade war with China. It's okay for China and Canada it's okay for China to hammer the crap out of the Canadian economy. But if the Americans impose 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum, oh, it's the end of the world. And unfortunately, whatever the news says is what millions of Canadians will believe. So if the news doesn't tell you to worry about these crushing tariffs that are being imposed by the Chinese, well, then people don't care. It's the same way people during COVID, they followed stickers on the floor. We do as we're told. Canadians are compliant. I did spend 10 years growing up in the United States of America. I am Canadian born, 1966, born in Port Colborne, Ontario. That's a little town uh, near Crystal Beach, Niagara Falls area, Welland County. However, at the age of 6 months of age, my dad worked in the financial sector. He worked for one of the big Canadian banks, and they had international operations down in New York City. So when I was 6 months old, our family moved down to New York. And as a matter of fact, we later moved to New Jersey, which is a suburb of New York City. And I went to kindergarten grades 1, 2, 3, and I was in grade 4 when we came back to Canada for a year and a bit. I finished grade 4, did all of grade 5 in Burlington, Ontario, while my dad worked in Toronto. And then for 1 year, he was transferred out to Portland, Oregon, on the West Coast, uh, BC, Washington State, Oregon, then California. And I was there for 1 year. And then the summer that I was turning 12 and going into grade 7, we moved back to Canada permanently. And I spent the next number of years growing up in Pickering. And I've lived in numerous places, so I have a bit of a wide-ranging perspective. I've lived in many different parts of Ontario. I grew up in Pickering. I also lived in Ajax and Whitby. I lived in North Bay. I lived in Kingston. I spent time in Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu. I was also in Quebec City. I was posted to Valcartier. I left the Canadian Armed Forces in June of 2021. A little bit of a side note for those new to the channel who don't know who is this guy. I did go to university. I did study political science. That's not to say that my opinions are fact. These are opinions. Uh, when it comes to political science, it really isn't a science. It's more of a behavioral science, which is what I call a soft science. It's not empirical. I invite you to weigh my opinions, my thoughts, verify everything that I say. With respect to Mark Carney and his these claims of plagiarism, maybe you think, 10 times stealing the ideas of others and presenting them as your own. Maybe that's not a big deal. It's a subjective call. Maybe you think moving Canadian jobs down to New York City isn't that big a deal. Again, that matters to me. It speaks to Mark, and merely the fact that he lied about it is more my concern. That he tried to misrepresent the facts and said that the decision to move those jobs to New York City was made after he left. No, the decision to make that move was made when he was chairman of the board, and he actually wrote a letter to shareholders encouraging shareholders to vote in favor of this move that had been made under his direction. However, the actual move did not take place until after Mark Carney had left. So he's playing fast and loose with the facts, and that's something that should be concerning, in my opinion, to Canadians. Likewise, we're about to see gas prices go down significantly because Mark Carney has taken the carbon tax that he had advised Trudeau on, because Mark Carney is all on getting Canada to net zero, and we have to put a price on carbon and we've got to tax it. And so we've had this carbon tax paid directly by consumers, and then we get a rebate check, get some of the money back. And according to the Liberal Party, they said that 80% of Canadians were paying less, that the rebate was greater in value than what they were paying in carbon taxes. And yet Mark Carney reduce the carbon tax down to zero, sucking and blowing at the same time, saying, we have Liberals telling us that it's saving Canadians money, and now they've lowered it down to zero because the reality is, and everyone knows that the cost of living in Canada has gone through the roof with the imposition of these carbon taxes. And what you're going to see April 1st, 2nd, gas prices are going to drop in a province like Ontario, where they were applied, by in and around 17 cents a liter. And the individual we need to thank for that will be Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives for making carbon taxation a campaign issue. And Mark Carney has been forced to backtrack on Liberal policy that he was part of. He's been forced to backtrack and reduce it down to zero. But rest assured, and he's already stated this, he is going to re-implement carbon taxation, but instead of having consumers pay it, it will be going directly on companies like the oil and gas companies. They will simply build it into the price. They will pay it directly to the government, and then they'll raise the price of gasoline. So I think what we're going to see is, in my area, gas is around $1.50 a liter. So we're going to go down to somewhere between $1.30 and $1.35 a liter. And people are going to be, oh, yay, Mark Carney's wonderful. And then if the polls prove accurate, and if Carney is reelected either to a majority or a minority, he's got the NDP in his back pocket. And then that carbon taxation will be imposed directly on oil and gas companies and others. And then that we're going to be paying $1.60 a liter before the end of the year. It's like that GST holiday we got from Trudeau. It's just a gimmick to help him win the election, and it is working. And so how do we overcome it? Well, the thing is, we have to talk. We have to talk. It's not enough to simply be online and to be keyboard warriors, because the tech companies can throttle, they can suppress any postings, any sharing that goes out that does not fit the narrative. We saw this during COVID. We saw it during the US election cycle. The tech companies throttle content that doesn't fit the agenda of the World Economic Forum, calls it the Great Reset. The UN calls it their 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And this is Mark Carney's camp. And they want Mark Carney in as Canada's Prime Minister. And so any social media postings like my video are going to be suppressed. I'm a pipsqueak anyway, but the way we can get around this is we have to share directly with individuals online, not just simply throw it up on a Facebook, Instagram, Twitter type post. We have to be vocal. We have to talk to people, our friends, our neighbors, our colleagues. And the most important areas where we have to do that is in and around the major cities in Toronto, or rather Ontario, in and around Toronto, Hamilton, Kitchener-Waterloo, Ottawa. The major urban centers in Ontario are where this election is going to be won or lost. If the Conservatives can do well in the suburban areas around the margin, around the major centers, then they stand a good chance. If they do poorly, then we are in trouble, and we could be faced with another as many as 4 years of Liberal mismanagement, high taxation, increased housing cost, through the roof immigration. This is only a temporary pause on the wide open immigration that Canada's been experiencing. That is it's a major contributor to the fact that housing costs have doubled over the past 10 years. But my video has gone on for over half an hour, and I know shorter is better. So again, I will invite you to like, subscribe, share. Let's get talking. Let's share our views and opinions. There are a lot of things you can talk about Mark Carney that are not going to be on the nightly news, that are easily verifiable from reputable sources, like the fact that Mark Carney likes to put his elbows up so that he can rub them with the likes of Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's partner in crime. I mentioned already the lying about moving Canadian jobs down to New York City. We can talk about the fact, you can talk about the fact that Mark Carney is refusing to disclose to Canadians what assets he has, because having been installed in very unusual circumstances into the prime minister's chair as a unelected politician, uh, he has a 60-day window before he's required to divulge to the ethics commissioner his portfolio of assets. So he's keeping it hidden for now because we're in an election campaign and he doesn't want Canadians to know what's in his portfolio. He doesn't want Canadians to know that while he was chairman of the board over at Brookfield Asset Management, that he was advising for the acquisition of assets that were building pipelines in other countries, while at the same time advising that Canada keep its energy wealth in the ground, our oil and natural gas, LNG, not wanting Canadians to build pipelines to unleash the enormous wealth we have in the ground, getting the Northern Gateway pipeline because we have countries like Japan, South Korea, and other Asian nations screaming for Canadian liquefied natural gas. No, no, we don't want to, sell you our stuff. Buy it from Russia instead. There are so many opportunities that we have missed in this country. Anyway, that's long enough, 32 minutes now. I'll probably go another 2-3 minutes. But again, please like, please subscribe, please share, and please comment. Comments are very much appreciated. I do my best to read them all. Most of my videos I do live and interactive. I'll probably be doing one Sunday evening, so you're welcome to jump on. And if you're subscribed to the channel, then you'll be notified when I'm going live, and you can interact with me in the live chat. And I love the interaction. I love engagement. I love being challenged. I don't want to be in my echo chamber. If you're a liberal-minded Canadian, you're welcome to share your views, and we can go back and forth in a mature, hopefully in a mature, respectful way. I recognize that Pierre Poilievre, I have some misgivings about him. Yeah. I'm concerned that when he was running for leader of the Conservative Party, the leadership contest that he won, he was asked by a member of the public at a meet and greet event where you're doing the selfie thing. He was asked what his opinion was of the UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and Pierre Poilievre feigned ignorance. He said he wasn't familiar with them. I found that to be, I was gobsmacked, to be quite honest. I think I know perhaps why. I think Pierre Poilievre is aware of the 17 SDGs. I think it's just an area he decided politically that he better, play coy. And I don't like coy. I like forthright. I like honest. For the most part, I find Pierre Poilievre to be incredibly sharp, a very sharp analytical mind. That hurts him to a degree because he doesn't have that warm, fuzzy feeling that a lot of Canadians like. They like someone who says the right things, even if Justin Trudeau, you know, he talked a good game in terms of, being a feminist and, for minority rights and women and all this stuff. But then he goes and he fires Jody Wilson-Raybould when she doesn't bow the knee to him and give his buddies a sweet deal. And to me, actions mean more than words. Deeds mean more than words. But a lot of Canadians, just good words are enough. Well, he says the right things. Yeah, but he fired Jody Wilson-Raybould, Canada's first Indigenous Attorney General, senior ranking member of the front bench of his cabinet. And he fires her because she won't give a sweetheart deal to his buddies. She showed ethics. And Trudeau showed a lack of ethics. And now we have another ethically challenged leader of the Liberal Party, grossly ethically challenged, and yet Canadians are going to vote for him. And the way we're going to flip the script, it'll take a lot of work and there's not a lot of time. Mark Carney chose a 36-day campaign, the shortest allowable campaign under Canadian election law. The minimum is 36 days, and that's what he chose, and he did it on purpose because the more Canadians get to know Mark Carney, the less they are going to like. And the shorter the window, the less opportunity. The media can be all friendly. They'll have him on the phone with Donald Trump as he was today. Now, Donald Trump is playing nice with Mark Carney because liberals are easy to push around. He wants Mark Carney in the prime minister's office. Mark Carney is all ready to make us the 51st state, move our jobs down there like he did as chairman of the board at Brookfield. Anyway, I've rambled on enough. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you back, and I hope to see some comments. God bless.